When gamers think of the LEGO series, they think of LEGO Star Wars or LEGO Batman. Hell, LEGO Indiana Jones has been my biggest hit on here other than the time I tricked people into thinking they'd get to see titties in Grand Theft Auto. Still miffed YouTube nerfed that one before it could finish getting to 1 million views. I was mocking the kind of content you were trying to curb, YouTube. We were on the same side. This absolutely does not need the age restriction. Anyway, even if you get into the less immediately iconic LEGO games with things like Pirates of the Caribbean or worse Minecraft, I feel as though those will all still inspire warm feelings of nostalgia, or at least just recollection. But there's one LEGO title I feel like nobody remembers. Yes, obviously that is hyperbole. Some people are gonna say, well, I remember that one. Just go ahead and leave it in the comments so we all know you are unique. However, I am being sincere when I say there is one game that rarely gets discussed or even acknowledged, to the point that even I went in completely blind, other than knowing of its existence when I decided to make this video. Considering just how beloved even the more obscure end of these can get, that's saying something. If I so much as mention LEGO Battles, I will have people splooshing down in the comments. So that's weird, right? That something went so under the radar that someone like me, who has literally followed TT's games since the very original LEGO Star Wars in 2005, was in the dark about it? I had to find out more. And so I decided we need to cover LEGO Friends. My primarily male audience needs to stay right the fuck where you are. I see you eyeballing the YouTube homepage button. So if you don't know what friends are, they are human beings who actually enjoy being in your presence. Had to Google it personally. But if you don't know what LEGO Friends is, it's a theme that has been running since 2012, typically focusing on more domestic or suburban life, not unlike City, but with mini dolls instead of classic minifigures, and with brighter and more pastel colors and cutesier animals. If it isn't obvious enough, it's one that primarily started out trying to corner the more feminine market. While it is obviously more esteemed these days, often containing some of the most impeccable builds you can find on shelves, and highly successful to boot, in case doing the math to get to 12 years running so far was too tricky for you. There was some mild controversy when it first started. Naysayers were quick to point out that under a facade of equality, broadening LEGO's target demographic on the surface was very plausibly just soullessly cashing in on the toyetic juggernaut of selling dolls. I was never the worst hater, cause yeah, a toy company going for a lucrative market sounds obvious when you say it out loud. But I was a little bit sour on it for a while. It felt too hard like it segregated the audiences instead of integrating them. If these had used normal but girly minifigures, I wouldn't have cared. But instead it used mini dolls, which don't match the scale of minifigures very cleanly, and have legs that don't move distinctly from each other. I was clearly not the target audience, which itself is fine. But part of me always wondered where the boundary between, oh, girls just like dolls naturally, and girls will like dolls because that is almost exclusively what we present for them to like at an impressionable age, actually lies. Sorry to disappoint, I am not actually smart enough to answer that question. You should have known it from the guy who talked about GTA strippers once. I haven't cared in a long time by now, since the theme has proven its quality many times over, and anything to get new builders building is good in my book. Early in the theme's life, 2013 to be exact, the Nintendo 3DS received not one, but 2 exclusive titles, even the other handheld of the day. My beloved PlayStation Vita did not. The first was LEGO City Undercover, The Chase Begins, a prequel to the, at the time, Wii U exclusive title, LEGO City Undercover. Both of those cop-em-ups were handled by TT Fusion, the franchise's B team, who most commonly worked on the handheld ports of these, typically doing a fantastic job, which is why I'm so perpetually interested in said ports. Undercover just might be their crowning achievement, and The Chase Begins is surprisingly close to the full console version's game design for a handheld title. Since TT Fusion was busy doing all of that, Friends actually fell to the franchise's C team, Hellbent Games, who have made a small smattering of LEGO titles, such as the aforementioned LEGO Battles and a pretty solid Ninjago Arena Battler, Tournament, which is tragically no longer available to download on official storefronts. Unlike The Chase Begins, this one was also available for the regular Nintendo DS as well, which should imply some strong design limitations, but I'm getting ahead of myself. My preferred style for these videos is to break down gameplay and design in tidy little chunks, but I feel like that's not going to fit the feelings I want to convey for this title as accurately. So you are going to experience things the way I did, in linear, chronological time. Story time of a sort, I suppose. My first emotion was one of fear. 3DS emulation is not always smooth. Games that play like a champ on the real hardware will sometimes run like Fallout New Vegas on the PS3 when you've literally overplayed it so hard the save file is too big to play efficiently. Not that I would know. Fortunately, as this game had to be designed for an inferior port to work on the old-ass Nintendo DS2, this one operates fine. Other than some weird stuttering and audio issues during loading screens, I didn't really run into any performance issues. There's actually a very well-animated intro cutscene, though it establishes nothing too crucial, other than having a turtle and someone turning on stage equipment for a show. That transitions into the actual 2D loading art, which would probably be fine, but I find something very off-putting about Stephanie specifically, and I really can't put a pin on what that is. Like, the others don't creep me out, but my brain sees this and is determined that this will be the last face I ever see as I am murdered. Not even blaming Hellbent's artists on this one, I think this is firmly an irrational me problem. I was somewhat serious about the fear thing, as it turns out. Side note, I do not know the Friends lore, so I assure you I had to double check the various Friends names about 1,000 times each, even though I use each name maybe twice maximum here, because my brain rejected that information so hard I thought I was back in Spanish 2 for a second there. The whole conceit is that you are Olivia's cousin coming to visit her in Heart Lake City for an unspecified reason and presumably multiple months, since she mentions being ready for the best summer ever. Since we'll be customizing here shortly, and since it's obviously designed for the player to have a self-insert, this is my girl Sona, Charlotte. She's not a natural redhead, but she wants to try and see if that is a good way to express herself, and she's in Heart Lake City because her LEGO Friends parents are getting a nasty LEGO Friends divorce after her LEGO Friends father got caught fucking his LEGO Friends secretary. Now, what's the most crucial part of a LEGO game? Some people will argue the building, but these people are wrong. It's actually all about the smashing. Smash before anything else. To smash frequently and to smash hard is to have the right priorities. You can only get ahead if you are smashing everything without discrimination. If you aren't smashing, you should be ashamed of your personal failures. Guess what this game doesn't have? LEGO Friends completely lacks smashing. This is literally the primary gameplay mechanic that hooks players in to do all of the other stuff in the LEGO games. The non-stop mental satisfaction of constantly breaking shit for money matters quite a lot in this equation. But no, Hellbound has removed that mechanic entirely, replacing the attack button with a useless twirl. Apparently they decided that little girls won't be interested in the wanton violence, which is as detrimental to the gameplay as it is incorrect. If you were to have a bunch of young girls conjure up the scariest monsters they can imagine, the eldritch shit they would come up with would make Clive Barker look like Caillou. And trust me, you will feel off the whole time you are unable to break the bricks around you. This perpetually triggered decades of psychological gamer training in my subconscious, and yet remained entirely unfulfillable. Holy shit. I have never once thought I had a gaming addiction until this demonstrated the platonic ideal of withdrawal. This is not the only prototypical series system it abandons. Usually, these are about unlocking lots of characters with various moves and abilities to have the variety to solve puzzles. But as this is going for more of a miniature life sim, you're stuck with just the one. It didn't even get studs quite right. These are clearly denoted with American dollars and cents, with silver being worth 5 cents, green 10 cents, blue 25 cents, and rare purple 50 cents. I don't know why they changed the gold color, and I don't know why they changed the values. The lack of monetary realism was not going to break my immersion in this game where I pretend to be a doll. The biggest issue is that this makes financial progression feel a lot slower, even though, proportionally speaking, it doesn't necessarily do that. It's bizarrely the same issue I discussed with Kryptonite's Game Boy Advance port of the original LEGO Star Wars in 2005, only at least that was in full numbers and not fractions of a dollar. Before Olivia would even let me move into my new home, she forced me to do manual labor, building a doghouse before then saddling me with the responsibility of a dog. Pro tip: there are a few things you should never gift someone who doesn't explicitly ask for it, and a living animal, such as a puppy, is high on that list. Also high on that list is a firearm, for someone who literally just had to quit antidepressants cold turkey at the same time his grandmother was rapidly declining in hospice care because the original prescribing doctor of said antidepressants closed his office and left no continuity of records after he was charged with a DUI, though thankfully Olivia didn't have the poor taste to give me a pistol. Dad. The puppy has the series' classic ability to track and dig up items, and can also be customized with a couple of ethnicities and accessories, and I gave him a cool set of headphones so he can listen to some nice music. Finally allowed to go inside, the Friends gave me a private webcam show, and I got my own room for customizing and listening to jams, too. I met Olivia back outside, where she gave me a cell phone so characters could communicate by text with me, so they wouldn't have to pay those greedy voice actors any more than they were already getting, and the game leveled up our friendship status, where she still made me take a watering can to do more manual labor. Fucking hell. When you're ready to go, she takes you to school, even though it is summer. To be fair, maybe Hellbent doesn't realize Americans don't typically have year-round school. We do it seasonally, with summer off, so that the working class has their children available as labor, and we don't all starve to death from being poor. In this new location, I quickly realized these weren't so much open areas to explore, or even hubs, in so much as they were linear corridors, meaning there would be very little semblance of exploration either. I was ready for a level or something to break that up, but unfortunately that never came either. This game didn't have levels, it had tasks, and tasks alone. You get a checklist for which tasks to take on, and that's gonna be it. The science teacher tasks you with the mediocre combine primary colors puzzle these games frequently revisit, only without big crazy machines that usually make it more visually interesting. Stephanie tasks you with practicing soccer, for her, I guess? involving an overly simple directional minigame and an apparently anti-gravity soccer ball. Literally every science fair student tasks you with basically fixing their projects for them. Admittedly, at least that one unlocks a motherfucking robot as a new pet for you, which will tragically remain the coolest detail to stand out in a sea of basically fetch quests and banal mini-games. This early on, I was already bored out of my fucking skull. You meet someone, they give you a tool that can really only be used in very specific situational areas. It has you do that something multiple times, and then you eventually unlock a new minigame of some degree, or a new pet like the robot, or a cat which can jump high and run along narrow walkways. Nothing was particularly interesting in or around the school. The money the game is rewarding you with also just doesn't do enough. There are random vendors or vending machines where you can just buy random things like pies or apples or pet treats, but none of these had clear needs or uses yet. You can also buy new clothing items, so I at least got to be a fashionista of sorts, but it wasn't engaging enough. This would have been so much less painful if there were smashing to get me through the experience. But no. I decided to eventually ditch school to hang out with other friends, fearing quite accurately that they too would exploit me for my labor without offering any respite of their own. I was correct. The main street was also painfully dull, barring a turtle who had to be bribed to play as instead of just joining my motley pet crew like the others. He can only swim in the fountain, and solving his puzzle merely unlocked more clothing items. Sure, it let me be an absolute queen, but I was a bored queen. I spent a good hour, really only the second in the game at this point, trying to find something engaging in this area, even just to cling to in a funny storytelling sense of the word. But Heart Lake's main street proved to be bankrupt of entertainment value. Desperate for something to make me, BaneShake's Charlotte, feel alive, I went to the beach at the request of Andrea. Sure, it was to cover her shift at the diner, but one of her multiple tasks finally paid off a little. See, this minigame was the first I had played with any semblance of depth. You know those diner games you can find online or in mobile games where you have to make and serve the correct orders to customers in a time constraint? It's one of those. A fairly simple one, but hey, finally something with any semblance of stakes. I never thought I'd say this, but thank God, I finally had a way to face the consequence of potential failures. I did not fail, it was very easy, but just knowing I could have made this the most fun I'd had yet. The reason she needed her shift covered was because she's going to set up for a big concert, and she supposes you can come help since you were such an exploitable proletariat. So we went over to the lake. Turns out Heart Lake's lake is shaped like a heart. I legitimately had never considered that at all with the name of the place. I am dumb. This is where the game broke me though. To set up this concert, you have to help fix the stage, which already slows your walking speed to a crawl up there, for reasons best explained with God is dead. But one place requires you to jump up with your cat to knock down an inexplicably placed toolbox. I don't know if I was somehow doing something wrong in this otherwise mechanically simple game, or if the game was just bugging out, or if it was somehow connected to the slow-ass walking speed on this stage, but the cat would not jump up to walk along the beam as it had every other time. It could not make the jump. It was physically impossible in the game at that moment, so after a few empty hours of tedium, I shut off the game and never went back in. Charlotte is still going to be sitting there in digital limbo until I delete the game or my device breaks, giving her the mercy of non-existence in the void to escape that trudging hell. What the actual fuck happen with this game. I get that it was supposed to be designed for young girls, but this is the most patronizing, condescending busywork imaginable. You could still easily do the dressing up and the cutesy animals and the making best friends stuff without getting rid of the stuff that makes these games appealing in the first place. You could do well-designed levels, still themed around school or socializing, and make it work. I know this because LEGO Harry Potter already did, and those levels were still up to the high bar of the levels about fighting dragons and giant snakes. Also, you know I'm being serious when I almost missed an opportunity to mock the shit out of Jerkoff Kegel's Rolling, Queen of the Farts. This is the worst thing the LEGO adaptation series has ever put out there. You don't have to dumb down things even further to make it for girls. Girls and boys are not so different that one can only function if you give them Fetch Quest Simulator 2013 with a pretty bow, while the other gets Mega Destructo Action Blitz 3000. And none of the problem here is how feminine or how masculine the tropes presented get to be. This game is the slowest possible way for a developer to spit on half of the population for no other reason than churning out their own lazy product. Get the fuck out of here, this game. You know what? Next time I'm looking at an actually good one of these games to wash this taste out of my mouth. Subscribe so you don't miss my coverage for LEGO Batman on the Nintendo DS.